We see these headlines all the time, stock market dips, new regulations, and they often feel like separate little incidents.
Right. Isolated events.
But what if they're actually more connected? Like tremors shaking up the whole economic landscape, affecting our lives, our finances in ways we don't always see right away.
That's exactly what we're getting into today. We've spent time digging through recent reports, CNBC, MarketWatch, Fox Business, the usual suspects.
Yeah.
And we've tried to pull out the really important signals, separate them from all the noise. The goal isn't just listing facts.
No.
It's about understanding the currents underneath and how these things, often surprisingly, link up.
Think of this as your efficient guide to the big picture. No need to read every single article yourself. We're trying to find those key insights, those connections that really matter right now.
And maybe uncover some of those aha moments. We've got quite a mix today. Credit ratings, trade tensions, tech shifts. It's all woven together.
Okay, sounds good. Let's kick things off with something that sounds maybe simple but carries weight. Moody's. They nudged the U.S. credit rating down slightly, the AA1. What's the real story?
Well, Moody's was pretty direct. They pointed to the growing difficulty, basically, of financing the government's budget deficit and, well, the overall debt. It's a flag about the long-term fiscal path.
Right. But Treasury Secretary Bessent sort of brushed it off, called it a lagging indicator.
He did. Looking backward, not forward, was his take. But, historically, even small downgrades like this can signal a change in how investors perceive risk. It's something to watch.
Interesting. Because the immediate market reaction was weird, wasn't it? U.S. stocks went up that Friday.
Yeah, they did climb initially, which might have been down to other factors that day, but then come Monday, markets in the Asia-Pacific region fell.
Ah, okay. So what does that tell us?
It suggests maybe a more nuanced reaction globally. The U.S. might have shrugged it off for a day, but elsewhere, the downgrade definitely registered as a concern. Shows how interconnected things are. Investors everywhere watch U.S. finances.
And then that jump in the 30-year Treasury yield, over 5%.
Yeah.
Hadn't seen that since late 2023. How does that fit in?
That's a really key piece. If a country's credit rating slips, investors might demand a higher return on its debt to compensate for that perceived extra risk.
Makes sense.
So that higher return means a higher yield on bonds like the 30-year Treasury. It's like charging someone a bit more interest if their credit score dips. This yield surge looks like a tangible market response.
Now, Ray Dalio, he always has an interesting take. He warned Moody's might actually be understating the problem. What was his angle?
Dalio's focus is really thought-provoking. He honed in on the risk of the government potentially just printing more money to pay its bills.
The debasement argument.
Exactly. He argues that risk, the potential hit to the value of treasuries from inflation or printing money, is maybe a bigger threat than a one-notch downgrade really captures. He's looking past just the debt numbers to the response.
So for you listening, this isn't just abstract finance talk. A downgrade, higher borrowing costs, worries about long-term stability. It can ripple out, affect interest rates on mortgages, the overall investment climate. It's foundational stuff.
Precisely. These are the building blocks that can have knock-on effects everywhere.
Okay, let's pivot now. Another critical area. U.S.-China trade. Tariffs. Always ongoing. Recent data from China looked a bit mixed. Retail sales were soft.
That's right. Retail sales growth was 5.1% in April. That missed expectations and was down from March. Could suggest Chinese consumers are being a bit cautious, maybe feeling some economic uncertainty.
But on the other hand, industrial output was strong.
Surprisingly strong, yeah. Beat expectations. Grew 6.1% against a 5.5% forecast.
So weaker consumer spending. But factories are still churning things out. Does that divergence tell us anything about how they're handling U.S. tariffs?
It's a fascinating contrast, isn't it? The strong industrial numbers might mean manufacturers are finding ways to keep producing, maybe exporting effectively, possibly blunting some immediate tariff impact on factories, or maybe shifting focus to exports.
And speaking of tech and China, NVIDIA's been in the news about those chip export rules. What's the situation there?
Well, NVIDIA publicly denied sending specific chip designs to China that would get around the new U.S. restrictions. It's tricky for them.
Because that Chinese AI market is huge.
Absolutely massive. NVIDIA's CEO estimated it could hit $50 billion in just 3 years. Losing that would be, quote, a tremendous loss. So they're walking a very fine line with these regulations.
It's a real tightrope, balancing security concerns with just enormous market potential. Now, China's not staying quiet, right? They accuse the U.S. of undermining agreements.
Indeed, Beijing claims the U.S. walked back on preliminary trade deals, especially after the U.S. warned against using Chinese chips, calling out Huawei specifically. They want the U.S. to correct its mistakes, sees it as discriminatory, raises the risk of more retaliation.
Feels like constant tension there. And it sounds like these tariffs are leading to some creative accounting, customs fraud.
That's putting it mildly, perhaps. Reports suggest a rise in things like undervaluing shipments, mislabeling goods, using shell companies, all to dodge U.S. tariffs.
Which creates risks for U.S. businesses involved, I imagine.
Big risks. Legal trouble, financial penalties. It complicates the supply chain significantly.
So the tariffs aren't just a simple penalty. They're causing these workarounds. And it hits companies differently. Diageo, the spirits maker, they're feeling it.
Yes. Diageo think Johnny Walker figures Trump's tariffs are costing them about $150 million a year. So they've launched a big $500 million cost-cutting plan. Interestingly, they said it hasn't hit their business in China much, mostly just U.S. imports.
Fascinating. And then you have Home Depot taking a different approach compared to some others.
Yeah, what's notable is Home Depot said they plan to absorb the tariff costs, not raise prices on consumers. Their strategy: diversify supply chains, source from more places.
Which contrasts with others like Walmart, Target. They warn price hikes might be needed.
Right. Walmart initially voiced those concerns quite publicly. Remember that?
Yeah, I do. It even got a reaction from President Trump on social media.
Exactly, telling them to eat the tariffs. Then later, Secretary Bessent said Walmart had agreed to absorb some costs, shows the pressure on retailers to avoid passing costs on if they can.
So this whole tariff situation directly connects to the price tags you see. It's a complex game between policy, corporate strategy, and what you pay.
Absolutely. And the ripple effects, intended or not, are still playing out.
Okay, let's hop across the Atlantic. Brexit. Still shaping things in Europe. The British pound rallied recently. Something about a new deal with the EU.
Yes, the pound got a nice boost against the dollar. The UK and EU announced this landmark deal to sort of reset relations post-Brexit. Covers a lot: security, energy, trade, travel, fishing. Markets saw it as a positive step towards stability.
Okay, that sounds like good news for the UK.
Yeah.
But I saw UK government borrowing costs, bond yields, actually went up around the same time. How does that work?
It shows how complex market reactions can be. While the deal was seen positively, rising UK bond yields suggest maybe investors still have worries about the bigger economic picture or government debt levels.
Right.
Remember, higher yields usually mean lower bond prices, so maybe less demand or more perceived risk in holding that debt, even with the good political news.
So it's not just one factor. A good deal helps, but doesn't erase all concerns. What about the wider European stock markets? How did they react to the UK deal and that US yield spike?
Interestingly, they were mostly flat that day, despite the UK-EU news and the jump in U.S. Treasury yields we talked about.
Flat.
But Germany's DAX index actually hit a new record high. So Germany stood out while other major markets were quiet or slightly down, suggests different dynamics within the Eurozone.
A mixed picture then. Germany strong. Let's look at a couple of European companies. Vodafone reported earnings. Sounded like a bit of a mixed bag.
It was. They reported an operating loss 411 million euros for fiscal 2025, mostly due to big impairment charges, writing down asset values, but revenue was up 2%.
Okay.
They also warned about trade uncertainties, potentially hitting future earnings. But here's the thing. Despite the loss, their stock jumped 7% after the report.
Wow. So investors looked past the headline loss.
Seems like it. Maybe liked other parts of the report or future guidance, or maybe the loss was already expected. Shows you can't just read the headline number.
Definitely. And Greg's, the UK bakery chain, they seem to be doing well.
Yeah, positive story there. They announced plans for more stores driven by product innovation and good sales growth. Shows that focusing on what consumers want can work even in tricky times.
Now, this was interesting. The European Central Bank suggesting the Eurozone is becoming a safe haven. That's quite a statement.
It is pretty bold. The ECB's view is that U.S. tariff policies are actually contributing to this perception. They see it as a historical opportunity to boost the euro's international role.
And the euro has gained against the dollar since the tariffs started.
Significantly, yes. Suggests these U.S. policies might be, perhaps unintentionally, helping the euro's standing globally. A fascinating side effect.
Very interesting connection. And defense stocks in Europe also saw a boost.
That's right. European aerospace and defense stocks climbed after Germany's defense minister backed Trump's call for NATO members to commit 5% of GDP to defense.
Ah,
So investors are likely anticipating bigger defense budgets and contracts in Europe.
so these European market moves,
Yeah.
influenced by Brexit aftermath, U.S. policy, global confidence shifts,
Okay.
it really drives home how linked these regions are.
Absolutely. What happens in one place definitely creates ripples and sometimes opportunities elsewhere. It's a dynamic system.
Let's switch gears to technology and innovation now. Quantum computing. D-Wave Quantum had some news. Stocks surged.
Yeah, big jump for D-Wave stock. They announced their next-gen system, Advantage 2, is available. Quantum computing has huge potential, obviously, for things like AI, complex problem-solving.
It's still early days, right?
Very early days, massive potential, but we're still quite away from widespread practical use. It's important to keep that perspective.
Good point. Meanwhile, the current tech giants are battling hard over AI. Google made a move.
Definitely.
Okay.
At their I/O conference, they announced AI mode right in Google search, clearly doubling down on AI in their core product to fend off competition, integrating it directly.
And Microsoft, not standing still, I assume.
No way. Their developer conference highlighted new AI features specifically for enterprise customers, for businesses, that could strengthen their position there and maybe lessen their dependence on OpenAI over time, building more in-house.
It's a real race. Fascinating to watch.
Yeah.
And AI isn't just for the tech giants, right? Even hybrid companies are getting involved. Warby Parker.
That's a great example. Warby Parker's stock got a bump after they announced a partnership with Google to develop AI-powered glasses.
AI glasses.
Hints at a future where AI is just woven into everyday things we wear, enhancing them in new ways.
Moving beyond software into the physical world. Now, while the U.S. is focused heavily on driverless cars, China seems to be making progress elsewhere in autonomy.
Yeah, reports indicate a company in China got certified to fly pilotless planes for certain uses. It's a different path, you know. U.S. focus is cars, Tesla. Waymo China is exploring aviation autonomy, too.
Shows innovation isn't just one track. Different places prioritize different things. And it's good to see tech tackling environmental issues, too. SmartX.
Absolutely. SmartX is a sustainable fashion startup backed by big names like H&M and Amazon. They're using AI to spot defects in textiles during production.
To reduce waste.
Exactly. Potentially cutting down textile waste significantly shows how innovation can help with sustainability in industries like fashion.
So all these tech developments, quantum's potential, the AI race, AI glasses, pilotless planes, sustainable AI, it really highlights the speed of change, disruptive innovation across so many areas, something you, listening, are probably very aware of.
These aren't just abstract ideas. They could genuinely change how we live and work pretty profoundly in the near future.
Okay, let's shift to the auto industry. General Motors and Tesla. GM seems to be changing its export plans for China.
Yes, they've decided to stop exporting some U.S.-made SUVs, the Chevy Tahoe GMC Yukon, to China via their Durant Guild platform. The reason? Significant changes to economic conditions, particularly relevant as tariffs have been temporarily reduced, which paradoxically made exports less viable under the new conditions.
Shows how trade policy directly hits even huge companies' global plans. Now, over at Tesla, Elon Musk addressed concerns about his commitment.
That's right. There'd been some chatter among investors about his focus, given all his other ventures. So he publicly committed to leading Tesla for at least the next 5 years, likely aimed at reassuring shareholders.
Okay. And while Musk is staying, Tesla's CFO got a huge pay package.
Huge is right. Vaibhav Taneja's 2024 compensation was around $139 million, mostly stock options and awards. Puts him way up there in terms of executive pay, even across different industries.
Yeah, that number definitely gets attention. Sparks debate about exec pay in tech. And speaking of Tesla, their delivery numbers recently dipped.
They did. Global deliveries in Q1 actually fell. First time that's happened in over 10 years. Comes amid reports of EV demand maybe slowing down a bit overall and, well, the ongoing public discussion around Musk's political stuff, which some analysts think might be affecting things.
Thus, both GM and Tesla are dealing with this complex mixed trade rules, changing demand, leadership questions, all impacting the wider auto and EV markets.
Exactly. These company stories are often like signals for bigger industry and economic trends.
Let's move to finance now. JP Morgan Chase CEO Jamie Dimon, he always offers some interesting, sometimes contrarian views.
He certainly does. One interesting shift. Dimon's apparently letting JP Morgan clients buy Bitcoin now, even though he's personally very skeptical about it.
Really? Despite his criticism.
Yeah. He compared it to defending someone's right to smoke, even if you don't approve. Said it was basically down to client demand. They want it, so the bank will facilitate it.
So market demand forcing the hand, even of critics. What else has he been talking about?
He's also been hitting out at current mortgage lending rules, argues they push rates up unnecessarily and hurt lower-income homebuyers without adding much stability.
Interesting take on regulations maybe having unintended consequences, and he has broader economic worries too.
Yes, he's voiced concerns about potential stagflation, that nasty mix of high inflation and slow growth. He also thinks markets might be too complacent, underestimating risk from big government deficits and those ongoing trade tariff issues.
So a cautious tone overall. But Bank of America still seems bullish on JP Morgan Chase itself.
That's right. After JP Morgan's Investor Day, BofA reiterated their buy rating on the stock. They pointed to strong management, diamonds sticking around, and the bank being well-placed for growth areas like private credit and AI.
Diamond's views really tie a lot together. Policy, spending, trade, and how it affects everyone's financial health.
Definitely. His insights are always a valuable way to look at the current economic picture, the challenges, and the opportunities.
Okay, lastly, let's quickly touch on U.S. politics and taxes. President Trump raised concerns about that SALT deduction cap increase.
Yes, he publicly worried that raising the state and local tax deduction cap would mostly benefit high-tax states, which he tends to associate with Democrat governors. He felt it could complicate the GOP's broader tax and spending plans. The proposal is to lift the cap from $10K to $30, phasing out for top earners.
So, differing views even within the party. And House Republicans aren't all on the same page either.
Correct. Reports suggest divisions, especially with the SALT caucus. Republicans from high-tax states pushing hard for the increase. These disagreements could slow down the whole tax bill process.
These political tax debates are definitely something for you, our listener, to watch. Any changes could hit your own tax situation directly.
Absolutely. Tax policy is a core government tool. Changes there ripple out widely.
And just briefly, let's loop back to President Trump's Middle East trip. It happened a bit earlier, but these trips often have lasting economic ripples.
For sure. That visit to Saudi Arabia, Qatar, the UAE had a huge agenda with potential economic weight. Talks likely covered the Israel-Gaza ceasefire efforts, oil markets, trade deals, investment, semiconductor exports, even nuclear programs.
And a lot of business leaders went along.
Yes, quite a few big names from Wall Street and Silicon Valley were at a Saudi-U.S. investment forum during the trip. Highlights those strong economic connections and investment flows.
And potential shifts in tech exports were discussed too.
That's right. Talk about possibly rescinding the AI diffusion rule, which affects advanced chip exports to the region. Plus, Saudi Arabia's interest in its own civilian nuclear program was likely on the table.
So even past diplomacy like that provides context for today's trade, tech, and energy dynamics, reinforces that interconnectedness theme we started with.
Exactly. These visits lay groundwork for future deals, future shifts. It all ties together.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, let's just quickly pull those threads together. We saw the U.S. credit downgrade ripple globally, affecting yields, with Dalio adding that deeper layer of risk concern.
We looked at the U.S.-China trade puzzle tariffs leading to industrial shifts, creative customs avoidance, and different impacts on big retailers like Home Depot versus others.
Yeah. Then Europe's mixed picture post-Brexit, the pound, rallying on a deal while yields rose, Germany hitting records while others stayed flat, shows internal variation.
Technology just keeps racing ahead, quantum's promise, the fierce AI battle between Google and Microsoft, AI creeping into things like glasses, and innovation tackling waste.
We saw the auto sector navigating trade changes with GM, and Tesla dealing with leadership questions and shifting EV demand.
And Jamie Dimon adapting to crypto demand while warning about stagflation and regulations, alongside those ongoing political tax debates and the echoes of Mideast diplomacy.
It's really clear, isn't it? These aren't separate stories. They're all linked, part of this complex global economic web. Understanding the connections gives you a much richer perspective.
That interconnectedness is everything. So here's something to think about for you. Considering all these factors we've touched on, credit, trade, tech, politics, everything, what single event or underlying trend do you think might have the biggest long-term impact on the global economy in the years ahead? And why? What's your reasoning?
It's that constant push and pull of all these forces that will keep shaping our world. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.